Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She's the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is November 28th, 2024. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I will be your host. You can send your questions and comments to Helga via email. Send them to questions@schillerinstitute.org, or you can post them on the chat page. Now, Helga, it's been a little while since we last spoke, but in that period, there's been a sharp escalation of the conflict in Ukraine as the Anglo-Americans have launched long-range missiles into Russia, almost as soon as the Biden administration gave the go-ahead to do such strikes. The response from Russia was to launch a new kind of hypersonic missile called the Oresnik, which devastated both the munitions plant it hit and the utopian fantasies of the NATO brain trust, so to speak. Russian spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said that the use of the new missile sent a clear military political signal. Yet 2 days later, NATO forces shot more long-range missiles into Russia. So this situation provoked two questions. First, from a German who served in the military in Germany, writes that he was shocked to hear that the Anglo-Americans have launched a new round of strikes into Russia, which confirmed for him that Scott Ritter is right. We are on the threshold of nuclear war. Do the Western strategists not see that? Are they willing to risk everyone's life to prove that they are right, that Putin is bluffing? And from Thomas, who often sends in questions, he writes that NATO is running out of weapons to send. Why do they refuse to see that the war cannot be won?
Well, I think President Putin is doing the very best to, penetrate the skulls of these people, because just now at the Collective Security Council, the CESTO treaty in Astana, in Kazakhstan, Putin basically went through a long description of how many missiles Russia has, that it has about 10 times the number of missiles all NATO countries combined. And then he went through the different categories of the hypersonic missiles. And basically in each category, he said that the Russian version is superior to the NATO one in terms of range and sophistication. So, I think it's absolutely horrifying to see how the Western establishment, NATO, but also certain governments, the French, the British, how they absolutely refuse to recognize that, if they continue like that, they get a nuclear war. And, the idea, that you can defeat Russia militarily is so completely out of the window that you can only say this is all a sign of madness, of pure desperation. And, I try to explain it to myself and discuss it with some people. What is it? What prevents these people of recognizing that the game is lost? I think it has to do with the fact that, these people mostly are not very skilled. They are not great figures, like we used to have in the past, de Gaulle, Nehru, Gandhi, Adenauer, you can name many others, Kennedy. But these are people who are very poorly trained, and they have acquired certain privileges by being political leaders, and they cling to the narrative they have put out themselves. And it's as if they have a spectacle on, a transatlantic spectacle, and they are incapable of recognizing that the world around them has changed in the most dramatic way, like we have not seen it in 500 years. I have maintained many times in the past that the change we are seeing right now is as fundamental as the change from the dark age of the 14th century to the Renaissance of Italy and the modern times, which was introduced by that leading to a completely different set of axioms in the understanding of people about man, nature, the society, and so forth. And they're just incapable of recognizing that. So I think it's extremely dangerous, and I can only say that, what Scott Ritter is calling for, namely an international mobilization, so that people are aware of the danger, is absolutely called for. And we are trying to likewise alert the world population as much as we can reach by convening a new international Schiller conference on the 7th and 8th of December, where we will try to, both portray the acute danger, but also portray a way out of it, because the solution does exist. Actually, it would be very easy, if the West would stop this mad confrontation trying to suppress the global South and instead join them. It would be relatively easy to resolve it. But I think we are in for the worst 5-6 weeks in world history, because, until Trump comes in, I think, there are many commentators warning that the Biden administration may try to create a situation for Trump, which, according to their plans, would mean that Trump cannot resolve it or not walk it backward on the situation of the war. But we are de facto in a state of war between NATO and Russia. And that is not what various Russian officials have said, but now also the former head of MI6, Dirlov, Sir Richard Dirlov, said the same thing, that Tusk, the Polish prime minister, would be wrong, that we are not on the verge of a war, but that we are in a war already. And I think people better wake up to that fact before it is too late.
Now, you mentioned some solutions that are out there. You've been emphasizing that this ongoing war is related to the collapse of the economy. The Schiller Institute just released a new report. Development drive means billions of new jobs, no refugees, no wars. And that's available for people. They can get it through the Schiller Institute. Now, Helga, we have a question about the Oresnik missile. Someone wrote in and said, do you know if the development of this system would have been banned if the U.S. had not withdrawn from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty?
Yes, that is very true. The Oresnik is, according to Russia, Putin himself, basically it's a system which is a hypersonic intermediate range missile which can reach every part of Europe. It is Mach 10. That's a speed which is, of such a nature that it cannot be intercepted. So that missile system was sent to a weapon factory in Ukraine, and Gilbert Doktorov, an American analyst, basically claims that it did hit, among other things, a Rheinmetall repair factory for the Leopard tank. Now, that would be a clear message to Germany as well. And normally Doktorov's intelligence is accurate, so one better looks into it, because that is one hair width away from a very clear message to Germany as well. Even so, I must say that Scholz at this point is sticking to his refusal to send the Taurus missile to the Ukrainians. But that is all hanging by a hair trigger. So it's a very incredible, dangerous moment.
You're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, and you can send her questions and comments at questions@schillerinstitute.org. Helga, from an activist in Virginia, she writes, Dear Helga, happy Thanksgiving Day. I give thanks today to you, Harley, and the LaRouche organization, and pray that more people listen to you. Here's my question. Why do you think Donald Trump has remained silent on the danger unleashed by the Biden administration allowing long-range missile strikes? What can we do to make sure the neocons don't end up taking over the Trump presidency as they did in his first term?
Well, I think that is a concern. I'm not in a position right now to give a definite judgment because, on the one side, Trump has said he would end the wars. He has appointed Mike Waltz to, I think, be the no, Keir Kellogg, former military man, to be the special envoy for the Ukraine Russia situation. I tend to think that he definitely would want to bring this to a close, but that does not answer the question what will be Trump's policy on the Middle East, which is much more worrisome. All the appointments are people who are staunch supporters of Israel. And naturally, the big one looming in the background is what will Trump's policy be in respect to China. So, given the fact that the transatlantic financial system is absolutely on the verge of a blowout, there's so many factors that I think that the situation will not be remedied at all, even if Trump manages to put down the flames on the Ukraine situation, which is the acute danger of nuclear war, because the reasons for this conflict are much larger and deeper. Namely, it is the systemic question, the fact that the neoliberal model, the liberal model of economy and the neoliberal values which go with it are clearly failing. And, you have the rising states of the global majority, you have the incredible economic developments in China, and the BRICS countries forming a new economic system. And as long as the collective West, or some people in the collective West, are determined to suppress that development, we are on the verge of World War III. This is why I think the only way we can get out of the situation is to really move the whole world into a new paradigm, modeled on the Peace of Westphalia, that we have to have a new security and development architecture which takes into account the interest of every single country on the planet. Because if you don't do that, if you leave out some outcasts, some pariah states, so-called, geopolitics will not end. And I think geopolitics is the biggest disease in international politics, which we must get rid of. So that is why I think, the kinds of topics which will be discussed at our upcoming conference are the most important for people to deal with, because, if you just keep doing the same thing, a catastrophe is looming.
We have a comment from an activist who's agreeing with you on that. Debashis writes, mobilization for peace, marches, alternative media, spreading the truth at Mach speed via social media, Schiller pamphlet to discuss, conferences, raising the intelligence and cultural meeting. That's what's needed. So there's one person who's backing what you're calling for. Now, I have a message from Scott from Atlanta. He writes, I lived in Germany for 10 years and grew to love the country. I have friends there who are depressed by the political and economic situation there. Is there something I can tell them that would give them hope for a better future?
Yes, tell them they should remind themselves of what Germany used to be and help to return to that, because it is so unbelievably. A few years ago, Germany was respected in the whole world for its science, its technology, its engineer know-how. The people of the great poets and thinkers and inventors, when you would travel abroad as a German, you would be always treated with respect and sympathy. And now, I was just traveling abroad, and when you meet people from other countries, they almost look at you like pity, saying, "Oh, what happened to Germany? It's collapsing. They don't have a government which defends its interest." everything is collapsing right now. And the people in Germany in general are very desperate. Those who are not part of the political establishment or the club of, privileged people, but those people who are fearing for their jobs, they fear unemployment, they're completely freaked out. There is a big fear of the danger of war, and they don't know what to do. I think, it's a very critical moment in German history, and the best advice you can tell them to get in touch with us, help us to turn the situation around. But I think for Germany, if we do not go back to our great tradition of the German classical period, the ideas of Leibniz, of Cusanus, of Lessing, Schiller, Beethoven, the whole classical music, unless we reconnect with our roots, I don't think we will have the strength to basically get out of this crisis. We should do what the Asians are doing. The Asians are, looking back at their history, which in part is 5,000 years old, but they take from that great tradition the power and the strength to define a positive way to the future. And I think in Germany, we have lost our sovereignty so completely, not that it has to be, but people don't get their act together, and we are right now governed by a political class which has completely thrown sovereignty away to the Anglosphere, taking orders from Washington, from London, and the population is left without a shepherd. And it's an incredible moment in German history. So if you have any way of talking to your friends, encourage them to do these two things: get in touch with us and help us to restore the great classical tradition of German culture. And then I'm certain that we can find a solution.
Now, you just mentioned a moment ago that you were abroad recently. I understand you were at a major conference. Can you tell us something about that?
Yes, I was the invited keynote speaker at a very important conference in Guangzhou in southern China. That's the famous Greater Bay Area, which is, the motor of the world economy. It's the motor of the Belt and Road Initiative. And this was the annual conference of the Maritime Silk Road. And it was a big international conference, and a lot of discussion about, it's so different, in China, but also the countries of the Global South, which were guests there and speakers also from Europe, some speakers. They were all concentrated on problem solving, on how to make things better, how to construct railways, how to make ports functioning, how to improve agriculture. It's a completely different mindset, and I think it's much more healthy. And I think that if we want to get out of this crisis, we in the West, that is European nations, but also the United States, should stop the confrontation with these countries and just basically say, let's join hands and let's solve problems together. This new pamphlet, which you just mentioned, which will be an item at the upcoming Schiller conference as well, it basically says, what are the common interests between Europe and the United States and the countries of the Global South? We have to solve the migrant question. Trump, whatever else he will do, he intends to build a wall between Mexico and the United States to keep the migrants out. Now, that is not a very smart solution, because all you do with that is you impose a lot of suffering on the refugees and you leave them to their own destiny. So what does that to do to remedy the situation? Likewise, in Europe, the EU is trying to keep the refugees out by beefing up Frontex, this paramilitary organization which is accused of pushbacks of refugees who are then drowning in the Mediterranean. It's an ugly story. No, what we should do is, join hands and, why not make a crash program of industrializing Africa, Latin America, and those countries of Asia which still need industrialization, like the Middle East, for example. Africa, 600 million people do not have electricity. So why not make a crash program to electrify the entire African continent as a precondition for the industrial development, starting with, various kinds of existing fossil fuels, but start immediately the building of nuclear plants, which takes 6 years or so, but to get it going. But then on top of it, start to build some so-called game changer projects like the Inga Dam in the Congo, or the Transaqua project, which is supposed to take about 3% of the water from the Congo and bring it through a system of canals and rivers up to Lake Chad, and that way give electricity and hydropower to about 12 countries along the way, which will be the beginning of the industrialization of the heart of Africa. And likewise in Latin America, where the Chancay first deep seawater port in Latin America has just been initiated by Xi Jinping and the president of Peru. This is supposed to be connected to the Bioceanic Railway, which will be the beginning of infrastructure development for the entire Latin American continent. And once you make such programs, then it gives hope to the people, and you can involve those people who are now fleeing, to get to the United States or to Europe, and give them a reason why they should be part of the build-up of their own country. And that would be the human way of solving the refugee crisis. So in this pamphlet, we are making an outline of what kinds of steps must be taken. And we will try to intervene in this present crisis because, not letting the refugees in, that does not solve the refugee crisis. It just means a lot of ugliness will be happening at the borders. But what we have to do is we have to remedy the reasons why the people are running away from war and poverty. And for the Middle East, we have proposed the Oasis plan. This would be a way of really making peace in the entire region. Actually, you need a two-state solution. You need immediate ceasefire. You need humanitarian aid. But then, even if you have a two-state solution, if you don't improve the economic condition, the danger is that this will not hold. So it has to be seen as an entire package. But, as I said earlier, the problems of the world are so deep and so manifold that I think we have reached a point in history where you have to do something which changes everything. You need a new paradigm. You have to move to a system where, all nations go to the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which is embedded also in the UN Charter. And then we have to build the world together. I mean, we are the human beings. We are not some troglodytes, or we are not some, beasts. We are the human species created, gifted with creative reason. And therefore, I'm absolutely optimistic that if we put our minds and hearts together, that we can solve this crisis.
Now, here's a question from a fairly prominent podcaster in the United Kingdom who's been following, he said, with great interest, the work of the International Peace Coalition. He said he's especially appreciative of the emphasis that we have on the role of the British, because he's been watching with great dismay how the British keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Not the British people, but the British city of London. But he asked this question: why is there no LaRouche organization in the United Kingdom? I think there are many people in England who are fed up with the monarchy and the role the UK has played in instigating the endless wars who would sign up to join you. Is there any possibility you can set up an organization here?
Well, if you know people who agree with the philosophy and the world outlook of our movement, then create one yourself. I think we have our hands full with what we are doing on the continent and trying to, create a peace movement internationally, which is the topic of the weekly IPC conference. But if you are interested, then why don't you start a reading group? Start some, activity. You can have a local meeting once a month or once a week or whatever your temperament tells your ability. I think Harley would be happy to call you and discuss the details.
Yes, I would. Now, clearly there's a lot of concern about the Trump cabinet. People worried about is it going to be different than the last time? And here's a specific question from a regular who's often writing about economic questions. He said, why do you think Trump chose Scott Bessent, a Soros man, to be Treasury Secretary? Doesn't he know that Soros is the enemy number one for many people in the MAGA movement?
Well, I would think that he should know that. I mean, the choice of posts. Obviously, Trump is following some logic, of people who have done him favors or who are loyal or claiming to be loyal. I think this is a problematic choice, but let's see what happens. As I said, I think we are in such a change that if somebody who would follow the logic of the New York Stock Exchange and Wall Street will not be able to handle the crisis if it comes. And I think that given the fact that we are sitting on this incredible over-indebted bubble, that issue will sooner or later put itself on the agenda, and the four laws of LaRouche remain the only suitable approach. Which is the idea: first, you have to have a Glass-Steagall, exactly like Franklin D. Roosevelt imposed it in 1933. That is, you have to separate the banks, you have to put the commercial banks under protection of the state, so that business and trade and production can continue. The investment banks have to deal with their own problem without state support and without taxpayer money. Then you have to have a own credit system, a national bank. The power of credit generation has to go back to the sovereign power of the country. Then you have to have an agreement among national banks for a new Bretton Woods system, which corrects the mistakes of the first one, namely not to allow the development of the global south. And then you have to have a massive injection into qualitatively new technologies such as thermonuclear fusion, space cooperation. And I don't know if that is not done, then Trump will fail. So, I think this question will put itself on the table fairly soon.
Now, I have one more comment for you and then a couple more questions. William Gilchrist from Ireland said that he prefers the street with signs and leaflets as opposed to social media. And he says that on social media, you meet people who have been propagandized, and it's sort of an echo chamber, but it's better to do personal organizing in the street. Now, there's a question from Arden, who writes, more power to LaRouche organization and to your resource persons. My question is, what is your forecast for the next move if the UK continues to have Ukraine fire more of the Storm Shadow missiles into Russia? Will Russia actually fire missiles at the United Kingdom?
Well, that is indeed a question which could be answered with a yes. I think various Russian officials, including Putin himself, have made a clear warning that they will eventually not only hit the missiles, but the command centers from where the missiles are being sent. Now, I don't know if that will immediately mean that missiles will hit Great Britain. I would rather think that it's going to be US bases, maybe in Poland, Romania. It could be ports, it could be logistical supply routes. There have been made statements by Russian officials to this effect. I think that we will, if this keeps up, and especially the British are keep saying, that the Ukrainians should be supplied with more Storm Shadow missiles, more ATACMS, more Scalp missiles from France. I think if this is not stopped, I think there will be a reaction more than what we have seen with the strikes of the Oresnik missile. I think this is we are playing with fire, and I can only say, if we have, and I agree with the person speaking before, we should have mass demonstrations. People should be in the streets. We need leaflets. We need social media as well. But I think if you have any way of talking to all your friends and colleagues, networks, mobilize them against this, because I think the biggest problem is that we are sleepwalking into a catastrophe, or that is the majority of the population is doing that, led by absolutely irresponsible politicians who are preparing a war of aggression, and that should be eventually put in front of a tribunal.
Now, people can go to the schillerinstitute.com and register in advance for the online conference December 7th and 8th. That's at schillerinstitute.com. It's very prominent, and you'll be able to find it. And don't just register yourself, bring other people with you. It's an online conference. Now, Helga, I have a final question I think you're going to like. It's someone who writes, I love what the Schiller Institute stands for, peace and cooperation, but why do you place so much emphasis on classical culture? There are some classical pieces I like the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, but many others just go right by me. I'm 55 years old and I still like country music. I know Lyndon used to make fun of country music. What am I missing?
Well, I think the reason why you don't like classical music probably has to do with the fact that you don't really know it. And I think the reason why it is important is because it is composed in such a way that it speaks to the creative faculties of your mind. If you follow the composition by not just passively listening, but to actually trying to understand what is the musical idea of the piece, how it is developed, is there a fugal development, is there polyphony, how do the harmonies play out? All of these are led, in a certain sense, like singing voices. You have to study it more deeply, and then you will find that classical music is indeed encouraging those parts of your mind where new ideas are being developed. While I hate to say country music and other forms of so-called popular music, they're just sentimental. They speak to the senses, they speak to the emotions. They're sort of, letting it go. You can indulge in it. It's rhythmic. You can dance to it, but it doesn't really do what classical music does for your creativity. And it's unfortunate that if adults have never been exposed to a rigorous studying of classical music, songs. You can, also go to spirituals, and you have a similar poetic musical composition. If they don't have that experience, then it's very difficult. But I can only encourage you to spend some time, be patient, listen to it again and again, try to understand the composition, try to get an understanding of the notes, try to see if you can learn to read notes, try to learn to sing, maybe join a chorus, a classical chorus. And I'm absolutely convinced if you do it for a while, the more you get into it, the more you will discover the sweetness of the beauty you find there, which is not the kind of, letting it go with country music, which is more of, it's sort of, it's the opposite direction. With country music and popular music, you let it sink, you let yourself sink, you indulge. You can even enjoy it, but it's a kind of joy which is not creative. It's just, it lends to banality. Now, I probably make a lot of people angry, and that on Thanksgiving, so I know I'm taking a big risk here, but I can only promise you, if you take the effort and, study classical music for a while, and since you like the Moonlight Sonata already, there are many other Beethoven compositions which are equally pleasing to the ear. So do a little bit more, and you will, after some time, you will be overjoyed of the treasuries you will discover.
Well, Lynn once said his favorite country song was, "If you want to keep the beer real cold, put it next to my ex-wife's heart." So I think that's what you're talking about when you say it's sinking down. Helga, on Friday, that's tomorrow, another International Peace Coalition meeting. Any headlines you can give us for that?
Yes, obviously, we will discuss our own conference focusing on the acute war danger. We will for sure look at the world after the Oresnik attacks, which is a clear warning by Russia. And we will have for sure several experts discussing that. We will look at the situation in the Middle East. And, as I said, the weeks before Trump gets into the White House, I think I'm afraid that we will see some very, very dramatic escalations, bringing us even more to the brink of the disaster of annihilation of the civilization. So this is no time to, drift away in Christmas shopping fantasies, but it's the time to mobilize, because mankind has never been at risk as right now, and that will all be discussed tomorrow.
Well, thank you for taking the time on Thanksgiving Day to join us today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yes, till tomorrow.